Hi, my name is Stephen Aguilar. I'm going to be sharing work that's been a collaborative effort, mostly generated kind of in the use lab. So this is a version of a talk that we gave at the Learning Analytics and Knowledge Conference in Indianapolis. So I did my best to pare down the slides, and I'm going to go pretty quickly, hopefully. But if you have any questions, just let me know. So first, I want to recognize that this has been kind of an iterative process that predated kind of the work that we're doing today as a group. But I'm going to be focusing really on that bottom part. And essentially, this project started, and Daryl can attest to this, as kind of, there's a lot of student data, and we wanted to basically create something, a report for advisors, to get a sense of how their students were doing kind of in the STEM fields, right? So this started as kind of we cobbled together a bunch of data in an Excel spreadsheet. That's version 0, aptly named. And then we kind of started to try to do a few more things to make the data kind of a lot more accessible and a lot quicker to get. So I'm going to skip to the current version of Student Explorer, which is a tool that we're using right now to essentially report to advisors how students are doing in all their courses throughout a term. So our partners are kind of the MSTEM academies, and we added a partner over the summer, which is the Comprehensive Studies program. So the platform's a custom platform that was developed in LSNA. The processing is automatic, so there's no more hand computations that kind of plagued the system at the very beginning, and the frequency is daily. So this was kind of new because when this first started, the system processed the data weekly. So by the time it got to advisors, there was a little bit of stagnation. It was old, right? So you don't get a sense of how students are doing on that day. So the current version shows a couple of things. At the top, you can see kind of it shows students compared to their class average, so that's their performance paired up against the class average performance. We created what we call an E3 status, so these are just indicators for advisors to basically get a sense, okay, if students aren't doing that well, you need to engage them. If they're kind of iffy, you might want to explore, have a deeper conversation, but if they are doing well, you want to encourage them, so those are 3 E's. If we dig in, we again see kind of student performance plotted against class performance, kind of in the top, what would that be for you? Top left, or top right. And we also paired CTools login history. So when students log into CTools, we see this as an additional indicator for engagement. And if we dig in, we can actually now dig in at the assignment level to whenever an instructor actually puts a course comment on it. So let's say they write an essay, they bet, okay, you need to work on your syntax, for example. We can capture this information because it lives in CTools and begin to report it back to advisors, just so they get a sense, they can contextualize student performance within that course. So our setting for our investigation was the Summer Bridge program that occurs every summer. And these, I'm not going to skip over this, but it's basically a 7-week program. It's a lived-in residency. And students really develop a sense of community, and it's meant to bridge them to the University of Michigan so that they succeed. So our participants were academic advisors within the Summer Bridge program. That's a little bit of information about who they are. But I'm going to skip over to the data sources. There was log data, basically what they did within the tool, appointment calendar data. So they used, advisors used a custom calendar system, and we basically took that data so we would see which students they were meeting, when they were meeting those students, and at what time they were meeting. And then we did a pre and post survey that I'm not really going to get into. So we were able to plot use patterns. So the red dots, so there's red and blue dots and there's purple dots. The red dots are meeting times, the blue dots are activity within Student Explorer, and the purple is the overlap, right? So the idea is, or you can see that the very first week it makes sense, there isn't a lot of data, so they didn't use Student Explorer a whole lot. Lunchtime, sacred time, they really weren't doing a whole lot then either. And during the final week, Summer Bridge has ended, so there isn't necessarily a sense for them to really, they'll have final meetings, but there isn't really the imperative to start digging into Student Explorer. If we plot this a different way, we saw that the Student Explorer activity plotted with one-on-one meetings happened right before the math midterm, which was identified as kind of the most important part. What we want to focus on is that there were unintended patterns. So we actually weren't expecting advisors to use the system while they were meeting with students. The idea, at least in the initial design stage, was this would be a way to kind of understand how students were doing before a meeting, and then they would have the conversation. But what we actually found was predominantly advisors used it during a meeting with students. So I want to get into a couple of implications. First, there's intended use and there's actual use. The intended use was, again, as I stated before, but If it's going to be used during the meeting, then that has additional design implications. So this is an idea that I'm currently developing. It's something that I'm just calling design literacy as a placeholder, that whenever we design a thing, it has certain perceived affordances that we need to pay attention to. And I'll just leave that up for you to read.